Today, healthier is happening at CVS Health in more ways than you've ever seen. It's wellness destinations for seniors, including select locations with Oak Street Health and CVS Pharmacy. It's doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and everyone in between, offering quality care and support virtually, in person, and on the phone. It's in-home evaluations through Signify Health and meeting mental health needs through Aetna. And those are just a few of the ways healthier is happening. To see more, visit cvshealth.com/healthier happens together. CVS Pharmacy, Oak Street Health, CVS Specialty, Signify Health, and Aetna are part of CVS Health. Eligibility and services vary by location and individual.
Welcome to the Flash Finds podcast, the world's fastest podcast where we explore how Facebook can help you with the stuff you're into. I'm your host, Emma Rogue, and today I'm with creator and chef Chris Cho. Chris, what do people get out of your reels?
So people are super intimidated when they want to first try cooking Korean food, but through Facebook Reels, I make it super fun and easy and accessible within a 30 to 60 second video.
Reels is the cheat code. Thanks, Chris. See you next time on the Flash Finds podcast, all about discovering the stuff on Facebook you care about. Bye.
Conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And it is an amazing day. Well, it's an amazing day if you're a person on the side of conservative values here in Kentucky. It's an amazing day if you are a conservative Republican that believes in the Constitution, believes in the founding principles of this country, and believes in the Republican Party platform. Somebody who believes that picking and choosing winners and losers is wrong. That government's job is not to create policy, to create regulation, and to give financial handouts to the private companies they like best. If government is there to serve the people and not the special interests, then you had a good day, if that's what you believe. Now, if you believe, of course, that government just needs to work and people have to make a profit off of government, well, if we don't have the people in place that can direct policy the right way, how will we dumb citizens know how to behave? If that's what you believe, well, then yesterday was not a good day for you. But if you're on the side of conservatism, if you're on the side of liberty, you just had a fabulous election night. And we're going to go through all these races of note. We're going to kind of pick and choose through each one. I'm going to pull out some things of interest on each of the elections. This may be a two-parter. May have to pick it back up tomorrow because there's a lot of races to cover here. But if you can't tell, I am ecstatic because I'm not just your run-of-the-mill, radio show host. I'm not just your run-of-the-mill political talking head. No. Those people are not in touch with what's going on the ground. I am an actual active person within the politics here in the state. The entire reason why I do this show, the entire reason why I take the time out each and every day to do a podcast and a radio show, and now, for those of you who didn't pick up on it, a TV show, that's right, starting June 3rd on WBNA 21, every Monday at 11 o'clock, you can catch the Andrew Cooperrider Show once a week there on TV, hitting the small screen. I know, very exciting stuff. But the reason why I do all these things is to help get people informed to what's going on. I don't just rant and rave, I get out there. And those of you who join me out there, and you know who you are, those of you who donated money, those of you who went out and knocked doors, those of you who got active in your communities, pat yourselves on the back, because we had a pretty good day across the state. Now, there was some losses. We'll go over that, but we went pretty well and strong in. But before I dig into it, I do want to outline a few things. First, as I mentioned and talk about these races, when I talk about the establishment PACs here, okay, I'm talking about a PAC called the Commonwealth Conservative Coalition PAC, and I'm talking about Common Sense KY. These two PACs combined spent over $1 million this cycle. Over $1 million. They outspent every race they got into. They outspent the person they were up against, sometimes by as much as 10 to 1. I'm not kidding you. 10 to 1 in some of these races. And yet, despite that, out of the 12 or 13 or so races that they got involved in, they lost every single one but 2. And the only 2 they could win, well, they barely won one. It's still kind of being counted, but they're both incumbents. Because if those of you who listen to the show remember that when we were shaping up why this primary election was so incredibly important, it was because we were talking about the incentives going on inside our state legislature. What incentives go on to politicians? When politicians are looking at the board and they're saying, what do we want to do? Who should we listen to? You would like to think they listen to some principle. You'd like to think that they are just sitting there and saying, look, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote my conscience, or I'm going to vote the way my constituents need me to. But that isn't the case. See, what pushes these people forward, what pushes representatives and state senators and congressmen and senators and even the president forward is one thing. How do I get reelected? That's all they care about. That's the incentive. And for a very long time in politics, the way you got reelected was by spending a boatload of money. And if you could spend more money than the other guy, you would win. Politics is quickly changing the way that operates. Why? Well, part of it happened, it really excelled over the last 4 years. A lot more people started paying a lot closer attention to the politics, especially on the local side. The other thing is technology has gotten significantly more advanced. You see, back in the day, it was kind of hard to somewhat make a TV ad or something like that. But nowadays, especially if you get enough motivated people together, you can have people that make a pretty good ad, put it together pretty well, and communicate an idea and not spend a whole lot. In fact, it's within touch of almost every single person under the age of 30 can at least make a basic video. A basic video. Not a super fancy one, but a basic one. But a good chunk of them could even make something a little bit more fancier. And when you're on the side of truth, when you're on the side of going up against this establishment and corrupt forces, you have people who are volunteers. You have people who it's inspirational. Nobody's inspired to go volunteer for like a Mitch McConnell campaign. Nobody does that. I mean, I'm sure people do, and those people are trying to get a career in politics. But nobody's just like, I am so inspired by Mitch McConnell. He is such an inspiration to me. You know what I'm going to go do? I'm going to go volunteer to make free ads for Mitch McConnell. I'm going to go volunteer to help him on his social media campaign. I'm going to go volunteer to help him hit doors. That doesn't happen, which is why they shovel out tens of thousands of dollars to high-paid, useless consultants. If I have time today, I'll get around to that, this consultant piece, because how many races can you lose and still be employed? I mean, these people have never, most of these establishment consultants have never won a hard primary in their lives, a hard race in their lives, but yet they continue to get business, continue to get booked. Anyways, putting that to the side. But they pay these consultants, they pay these radio people out there tens of thousands of dollars to make this or make that, make this. Meanwhile, those on the side of truth, those on the side of doing what's right, maybe they don't have the same amount of funds, but they can go out and they can get these things together and spend far, far less money. And that's a real problem for those in power. That's a real problem for the establishment now because money isn't necessarily getting it done anymore. No. And the other thing is that it's significantly cheaper to get your message out. Back in the day, how did you get your message out when you were campaigning? Rewind to the 90s, let's say, or early 2000s even. What did you have? You had email, you had TV, you had radio. That's about it. Well, nowadays you have far more things. You have things like text messaging. You have things, and I know they're annoying. You have things, of course, like robocalls. That was always kind of been a thing. But you do have things like robocalls. You have things like YouTube ads and Facebook ads and social media ads. And those are far more targeted. So while you go spend thousands of dollars on TV ads, hitting all kinds of people that don't actually and can't actually vote for you, the other side, which is maybe a little less funded, is able to target and spend their money wisely. Because they're also being motivated, remember, by a cause, not by a paycheck, which is something so many people have issues with. So We will cover a lot of these races. Before I do that, I do have one note I want to make. Something interesting on the presidential primary side of things. Now, turnout was historically low because if your ballot was anything like mine, all you could vote on was the presidential primary. But this is interesting. Donald Trump got 85% of the primary vote. Well, Joe Biden got 71% of the primary vote. Remember, this is only Democrats, only Republicans voting. So it's not like you're saying, well, a bunch of Republicans are voting in the primary and they hate Joe Biden. Not the case. What's interesting, too, is uncommitted. So only 4% of those who voted in the Republican primary for president here in Kentucky voted uncommitted. Meanwhile, 18% voted uncommitted in the Democrat primary, saying they don't want anybody, and only 71% voted for Joe Biden. That tells you right there, that's a story right there to tell you Joe Biden is in real trouble. But we'll have more on all these elections after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. So we're going over election results from yesterday. I figure we'll start at the top and work our way down. First place we want to stop off at is the U.S. House District 4 race, where Thomas Massie had two challengers. Thomas Massie did handily win that election with 76% of the vote. And Michael McGinnis, I don't know who that is, got 13%, and Eric Dieters got 12%. Interesting amount for Eric Dieters, because Eric Dieters, of course, ran for governor before. He's a lot more known in political circles, and I think it says something about his standing within the 4th district that he came in third to a guy that literally, apparently, he looks like a really young guy, this Michael McGinnis guy, and apparently he still lives with his parents. Was able to pull off 13% of the vote, though. And what's notable here is not only did Eric Dieters try to sue Thomas Massie off the ballot, failed, but also they attempted to APAC because of Thomas Massie's votes on foreign aid. Love him or hate him, Thomas Massie never votes for foreign aid. You can disagree or agree, it doesn't matter. He never votes for it. Because of that, APAC and others started dumping a lot of money into his district, trying to get Thomas knocked off. Didn't work. Thomas Massie wins that handily, 76%. I want to stop off there just to mention it. Now on to the State Senate District 1 race between Jason Howe and Lynn Beckler. Looks like that race ended with 70-30. Those of you who listened to my episode with Nick Nash and Chris Weiss, you'll remember we were all in agreement that Jason Howe would win that election. We agreed he would win by a fair amount. We thought, I think I said it would be around 65-35. Looks like it was 70-30. Not too far off, of course, of where that was. Interesting dynamic in that race. Lynn Beckler was a member of the House, and he had been redistricted into another district there, out there, and ended up being incumbent versus incumbent, facing off for a House seat, and he lost. Well, he went up against Jason Howe in this election, and he wasn't able to raise the money and get it done. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about raising the money and getting it done as we discuss these state Senate races, because you have got to understand. Take, for an example, this state Senate race here had 8,000-ish or so voters in that state Senate race. 8,000. A lot of them had 10,000. A few of them had 12,000. If you turn instead to a House race that was in the same district, had 2,500 voters show up. So when you have a race that is 5-6 times the size of a state House race, you have to have 5 to 6 times the money, especially in these rural areas, because it's really hard to get out there and knock the doors. Very, very difficult to get out there and knock the doors. And so you got to have the money to send the mail. You got to have the money to get the ads out there. You got to have the money to spread the word, because boot leather ain't going to get it done in these rural districts. And that District 1 seat is very, very rural. It's a very rural district. So Jason Howe, incumbent, wins that 70-30 against Lynn Beckler. State Senate District 5, Stephen Meredith handily wins, figured he would, against Thomas Ballinger. Once again, same situation, not a lot of money behind Thomas Ballinger. And Stephen Meredith, incumbent, money, that's what's going to happen. Stopping off at State Senate District 7. Hasn't actually been called yet as far as who the winner is, though it would appear Adrian Southworth, the incumbent in that district, actually came in third with 22% of the vote. Ed Gallerin got 38% of the vote, and Aaron Reed at 39% of the vote right now. But as I said, they haven't called it yet. A lot of things at play in this race. Adrienne Southworth obviously being the incumbent. She's redistricted, picking up the biggest county within her district being Shelby County, where both Aaron Reed and Ed Gallerin are from and well known in. That already put Adrienne Southworth at a disadvantage. And then on top of that, there was a fundraising disadvantage as well, where Aaron Reed personally raised $180,000 or so. Ed Gallerin, same thing. Plus, Aaron Reed and Ed Gallerin also had people out hitting doors. Adrienne Southworth did have a pack coming in to hit doors for her too as well, but wasn't it enough to get it done? So Aaron Reed, it looks like, will win that. He identifies himself as a more conservative individual. He was forced into running into that election. It wasn't like, he set out to run against Adrienne Southworth initially, but he was kind of forced to go ahead and jump into that race because of how he was redistricted into that race while he already had around $100,000 or more raised for that election. And he couldn't spend it on anything other than that state Senate race. So that was certainly going to be something he was kind of forced into. And listen, if Aaron Reed didn't run, I think Ed Gallerin would have won because that Shelby County vote, I think, is what ended up carrying those two over the top. Senate District 11, that was an open seat in northern Kentucky. You had a shuffle going on between Steve Rawlings, who is the current state House representative for District 66, and TJ Roberts stepped up to run for Rawlings' seat there. Small note, TJ Roberts did win that election. We'll get around to that, though. I do want to take a moment to eat a tiny bit of humble pie here. At the time where this was a decision made, I was a little uncomfortable, and I talked to Steve Rawlings about this, and I talked to Chet Hand about this, uncomfortable about Steve Rawlings making that move to the Senate. Not that I thought Steve Rawlings would lose. He certainly would, and he won handedly. I mean, it was 77-23. I mean, it wasn't even a contest here. Steve Rawlings winning that walking away. And a big part of the reason why, and you're going to see this in these Northern Kentucky races, especially around Boone County, you're going to see these conservative liberty legislators, these conservative liberty anti-establishment candidates winning big. Because Boone County especially, but Northern Kentucky overall, has a really strong conservative grassroots. And that's what's important. If you're looking around and you're saying, I don't like the outcomes of the elections in my area, you need but say, we have to build a strong grassroots network to get the word out of who to vote for, because that's what they have in Boone County. And so I was a little uncomfortable, not because I thought Steve Rawlings would lose that Senate seat, but because I was worried about possibly losing the state House seat Rawlings was in. And quite honestly, we have a little bit more, quote unquote, conservative liberty legislators in the House. We're getting a higher percentage than we do in the Senate. We really don't focus on the Senate too much. And the reason why you don't see a whole lot of the PACs, like Commonwealth Educational Opportunities, Commonwealth Conservative Action PAC, I think it was out of Louisville. The reason why you don't see those PACs and Make Liberty Wins, another PAC that gets involved on the side of conservatism on liberty in the Republican Party, the reason why you see them not getting involved in a lot of state Senate races is, frankly, they're very expensive. As I laid out before, you can either do 5 House races or one state Senate race. And remember, too, your job as an individual who's out there advocating for these policy changes, you're not just trying to bump off the other side. You're not just trying to get your people in, but you also have to defend your people once they're in. So if you're trying to defend a state senator, well, it's hard because you have to now give up resources that you'd use to defend 4 or 5 House reps. That's part of the reason why. And it's just a lot more doable. Door knocking can get it done. But remember the incentive structure of what are you worried about? You're worried about being the next person on the chopping block to lose your seat. It's kind of like the ability to control a crowd of 100 people with only, 10 bullets in a gun. Obviously, you can't shoot every person there, but the people are afraid that one of the 10 who get shot is them. And in the same way, you obviously can't run and win 50 House races every single 2 years. But they're worried that the next two incumbents that get bumped off, last time it was 3, this year around, 2 incumbents got bumped off, we'll go into that, will be them. But also by showing that you can protect your people, well, that shows that, hey, you can roll with us and we got you, right? We'll protect you. If that's your side, if you can protect the people voting the way you want to and take out the other side, it shows I can protect and I can take you down. You want to vote with me. And so you're able to push members over. So there was some concern I had that by doing this, we would lose that House seat. And then I talked to a few members up there and I expressed that concern. They said, no, don't worry about it. We got it. We got it. We got it. And I have to say they were right. They handled it. I was concerned about nothing, but I do want to mention that I was concerned about it, but they proved me wrong. Moving on to District 17. This was another open seat House race. It was between Matt Nunn and Julia Jadek. This is Senator Damon Thayer's old seat. Matt Nunn has won this handedly, 67-33. Didn't think it'd ever be really close. Simply put, once again, rewinding back to the state Senate races, they are expensive. And Matt Nunn was able to send 4 or 5 mailers and some ads, do some ads and 4 or 5 mailers. Julie Jadek didn't raise enough to do but 1 mailer. Of course, Matt Nunn was going to win because people, in order to vote for you, they have to know you're running. And if you don't have the money to get the word out that you're running, well, then you're not going to be able to pull it off. Stopping off in the world of Democrats, I don't know much about the Democrats, but races as far as all the players go, but I do know something about this. State Senate District 33, where you had Gerald Neal. This is up in Louisville. Gerald Neal, and he was being challenged by an Attica Scott. You may remember Attica Scott as a state House rep that got in trouble for supplying shields to Black Lives Matter protesters in Louisville, shields and weapons to them. And she had stepped out of her House seat to run for Congress against Yarmouth. And not Yarmouth, sorry, against Morgan McGarvey, the current congressman there in Louisville. She'd stepped out, lost, and now she was taking it to the state Senate against Jared Neal. She lost. Jared Neal won 55-39. But that's it for the state Senate. Coming up after this, we'll start to dig in to these state House races. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. For the break, I've been going over last night's election results, just kind of doing a bird's eye view on each of these races. Over the next several days, I'll probably dig more down into the aspects and what will happen now because of these elections. But I just want to do a bird's eye view, talk about a little bit about what was going on in each of these races so we can understand the results and possibly quickly see how they're important. So turning first to State House District 2. This was against Richard Heath, the incumbent, being taken on by Kimberly Holloway. Now, those of you who listened to our Make Picks episode, and those of you who listened to the show several times know I've been calling this from a long ways out, saying that Kimberly Holloway was going to come up from behind and beat Richard Heath. Not up from behind exactly. I never thought she was behind. I thought she was going to win from the get. I said, this is a sleeper race. Richard Heath is sleeping. He's laying down. He doesn't take Kimberly Holloway seriously enough, and she is going to defeat him. She's got too much going for her in the district. She works too hard. And she did it. She beat Richard Heath 52-48. Now, this is an incredibly important win for the state for this reason, okay, as you're looking at your overall political map. So 3 years ago, the 3 quote-unquote powerful incumbents were knocked off. Adam Koenig, Sal Santoro, and Ed Massey. But they were all in northern Kentucky. And so the general talking point amongst the establishment to the rest of the caucus, Republican caucus, was, hey, don't worry. I know those powerful incumbents got knocked off, but don't worry about it. That's just a northern Kentucky thing. You're not in northern Kentucky. You don't got to worry about it. That's just those rabble-rousers over there. But with Kimberly Holloway beating Richard Heath way out west, and like I said, those who listen to the show know I've said this before, it sends a clear and concise message that, one, liberty candidates, conservative candidates, can win, not in Northern Kentucky. That you are at risk if you're an establishment hack, voting the way the special interests tell you to, voting the way that you think will line your pocket the most, voting the way that will pad that campaign account the most. You're going to vote against the people, against the platform you say you stand on, against the Constitution. You too can be taken down. It doesn't matter where you live. And that's the message Kimberly Holloway has sent. Said it does not matter. We can take you down. And not to give away too much. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but we're going to get ahead of ourselves. Now, those of you who've heard me break it down, I've mentioned the conservative incumbents that were facing challengers down. That this big multi-million-dollar PACs that were getting big money from Churchill Downs, from the hospital associations, from the Chamber of Commerce, from the teachers unions out of Louisville. They were spending big money against a lot of conservative candidates and that were taking on establishment people, while at the same time, they're spending big money trying to take down the conservative liberty incumbents. And they didn't take down a single one. In fact, they actually didn't get very close to taking down a single conservative candidate. A single one. But yet, not one but two of the establishment incumbents that they spent so much money defending, we'll go into who they are. Outside of Richard Heath, we'll go into the other one. All this money they spent and weren't able to do it. What's the message do you think the rest of the caucus has gotten? Moving forward, what is the message they've gotten? It is one, the establishment, the special interests, the horse parks, the teachers unions, the gambling mafias, the hospitals, the Chamber of Commerce, all those people that demand you continue to create regulation that funds their bottom line the best, all that, no matter where you live, they can't protect you. And not only can they not protect you, but if you vote with us, the people, on the side of truth, that's why we don't need so much money. We're on the correct side. We're on the winning side. You know you're on the winning side when you can spend 50 grand against somebody's over $500,000 and still beat them like a redheaded stepchild, like we saw in another race, like I said, we're going to talk about. You know you're on the correct side. Because that doesn't happen unless you're fighting for the truth. Because the truth has value that no amount of money can outspend as long as you can get the truth out there. So with that in mind, this Kimberly Holloway win should send a shiver down the spine of everybody up there in the legislature. Because if I'm to be quite honest, Richard Heath has a pretty run-of-the-mill voting record. Right smack dab in the middle with the rest of them. Now that's not saying much because we have such horrible leadership in our legislature, such horrible current people holding office just so wide that a run-of-the-mill voting record one is somebody that's still a corrupt puppet, but he's got a pretty run-of-the-mill. And on top of that, he was chair of the Agricultural Committee, a very powerful committee chair. A very powerful committee chair with a run-of-the-mill voting record compared to the rest of his colleagues, not in Northern Kentucky, just lost to a less funded, conservative upstart Kimberly Holloway with a little bit of backing from the conservatives all around the state, but by a lot of hard work on her own count. That puts them on notice. That's why that race is so important. Going on State House District 10, Josh Calloway is being challenged by Julie Cantwell. Julie did not really receive a whole lot of establishment support, though I'm sure they would have loved to take down Josh Calloway. I think they saw right away that Julie had way too many issues as far as her support for Bashir, support for abortion, and as such. And so they therefore did not get behind her. And Josh Calloway won that handedly at 79%, 21% for Julie Cantwell. Now to a sorry note here. Okay, we got a few races here, a little bit sorrier. We had House District 19, Michael Meredith facing off against Kelsey Rock. Michael Meredith won that hands down. He took away with it. It was 76-24. It wasn't very close at all. Obviously, they did spend a lot. I believe the Kelsey Rock campaign raised about 15 grand. Outside spending spent maybe another 30, so you got maybe 45, 50 on the side of Kelsey Rock. Meanwhile, the Meredith side spent over $200,000. Very difficult. Meredith's dad's a mayor in the area. Meredith has held that seat forever. It's a very difficult race. I mean, Meredith has some bad votes. He voted against school choice, voted against a lot of other things. But it just wasn't enough to get the job done. Michael Meredith, unfortunately, won that, in my opinion, but he did win it. That was one of the two races that the quote-unquote establishment forces really dumped a lot of money into themselves and won. One of only two. Next race to go over, State House District 24 between Ryan Bevins and Asa Wagner. I knew this was going to be a difficult one for Asa to pull off from the start. Asa's a friend of mine. Asa's on the conservative side for sure, but Asa's a younger guy. But more importantly, that district is very rural, and Ryan Bevins already well known in the area. And more importantly, Ryan Bevins had the dollar bills to get the word out. And it's a very difficult, district to knock because it's so rural. These rural districts, very difficult to get out there and knock. That was 75-25. State House District 29, this was an open seat. Chris Lewis won that handedly at 68%. Moving on now to, let's see here, moving past some Democrat races, because let's be honest, not super important, these Democrat races. They're really not. I mean, there's one a note when we come across it. I just think it's funny, but it's really, I don't think, super important. Let's move on to House District 45. Those of you who listen to the show know we've talked about this a lot, but you're going to have to wait till after this break for us to pick back up House District 45, go over the results in that election. You'll have to wait till after this commercial break. We'll be back in a few short minutes. And you're back here in this final segment on a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We've just been going over bird's eye view the results from last night's elections. We left off on State House District 45, and that was the big one. That was the one I talked about often on the show. We had Thomas Jefferson on the show. We pointed it out, and it was Thomas Jefferson versus Killian Timoney. And this was such a big one for a few reasons. First, Killian Timoney was, notice I'm using the word was, because was is the proper term to use for Killian Timoney, was the least conservative, just bottom line, least conservative representative of the Republican caucus in the House and the Senate. Frankly, he's the least Republican person in the state legislature with an R next to their name. Maybe you can drop the R and put on the D that so obviously belonged there. And how non-conservative is he? Well, according to the Family Foundation Legislative Scorecard, Killian Timoney was more liberal than 7 elected Democrats in the House. 7. That is literally almost half the Democrat caucus. There's only 20 members of the Democrat caucus, and Killian Timoney was literally more liberal than almost half of them. He's a middle of the pack Democrat. He's not even sort of kind of moderate. He's literally a middle of the pack registered Democrat representative. That's how he voted. But he's trying to lie about that. And he spent a lot of money doing it. This by far is the most amount of money I've ever seen in a state house race before. They spent nearly $500,000, if not more, on this race. $500,000. And Killian Timoney lost horribly. Thomas Jefferson took 72% of the vote to Killian Timoney's 28%. Killian Timoney only had 1,072 votes. That is an amount per vote of $466 per vote. $466 at least they spent. They almost spent $500 a vote. Thomas Jefferson, though, with $50,000, spent $15,000 of his campaign, $35,000 from outside PACs. literally a 10-to-1 spending ratio, beat him like a redheaded stepchild. Why? Because the truth has a lot of value. And all Thomas Jefferson's campaign had to do was get the knowledge of Killian Timony's voting record in people's hands with the facts and let them make the decision themselves. And they did. They took a look and they said, yeah, this guy is absolutely a liberal. And no amount of ads and no amount of mail and no amount of digital ads and no amount of times that Killian Timony repeated over and over again that he's extra super conservative, he promises, and Thomas Jefferson is just a big fat liar. No amount of times he did that would matter because the people had the truth in their hands. That's why Killian Timony is no longer going to be their state house rep. He'll finish out to the end of the year. But Thomas Jefferson has to go on to the general now, be the Democrat. Thomas Jefferson will most likely be that district's next state house representative because he stood for truth. Important stuff. And it also sends another clear message. It says it does not matter how much you spend. If you vote this badly, you will be gone. A clear and concise message. Do not vote like a liberal. Remember that when it's time for school choice votes. Remember that when it's time for social conservative votes. Remember that when it's time to take a vote on banning taxpayer-funded drag shows. And leadership better remember that as they fight that. It matters a lot. Turning now, starting to move into northern Kentucky, where they tried to take down some incumbents. State House District 47, Felicia Rayburn, was being faced off against a Mark Gilkison. I struggle with that last name. Mark was backed by the same PAC that dumped $500,000 behind Timony. And guess what? He lost 57-43. Felicia Rayburn takes it. 57-43. All Mark's money in the world can't get over the fact that Felicia Rayburn is a darn good state house rep. Moving on. District 50 race. Candy Massaroni versus Andy Stone. You may have heard me talk about this before. I talked about this on the show. Andy Stone, it's a no vote for Stone. That was the name of the episode where I talked about this. Stone, awful. They still spent over $200,000 outspending Candy's campaign by about 4 to 5 to 1, trying to take down this incumbent, Candy Massaroni, thinking she just won off a fluke. She can't possibly win again. I talked about this at length. But Candy Massaroni holds her own, takes 64% of the vote versus Andy Stone's 36%. Big problems for Stone there. Big problems. Moving on to House District 60, Northern Kentucky. Once again, Chris Pavese from California, former Democrat, comes out here, tries to run against Marion Proctor, and the establishment forces dump some big bucks behind Christopher, thinking they're going to take Marion Proctor. Why? Because she's fighting for certificate of need laws to be repealed. She's fighting for medical competition here in Kentucky in order to drive down our healthcare costs. And the KMA and the hospital associations, they can't stand that. So they dump tons of money into her opponent. And what happened? Marion Proctor wins 76% of the vote. A decisive victory. House District 61, Savannah Maddox. Some call the Queen of Liberty. Some say she's the master of liberty. This conservative movement. She really was the first state house representative to be truly outspoken and standing up against these establishment forces. They said, we're going to take on the master here. And what'd they find out? They found out that Jared Likens couldn't even come close to taking down Savannah Maddox. She wins with an 83% of the vote blowout on Jared Likens. Tony Hampton, Bill Parker, open seat. Tony Hampton takes it out there in Georgetown. Staying to Northern Kentucky for a minute. TJ Roberts, Ed Massey. That was that open seat with Steve Rawlings. Now remember, Steve Rawlings had beat Ed Massey 2 years ago, 66-33, when he destroyed Ed Massey, who spent like $250,000 to Steve Rawlings is 50, and he just got beat 70-30. Well, Ed Massey said, you know what? I want to come back and try again. And so this time he spent, again, $250,000, $300,000 coming from these PACs, coming from the teachers' unions, coming from all these places, trying to get Ed Massey in there versus TJ Roberts. TJ Roberts wins 74% to 26%, doing even better against Ed Massey than Rawlings did. Because of course TJ Roberts did. Because Ed Massey couldn't even win when he had the incumbent advantage. Why do they continue to dump money behind these losers? I talked about this before on the show. These people, they dump money behind proven losers. I don't know why. You're not showing us anything other than you suck at this. Staying to Northern Kentucky, Steve, don't. A rabble-rouser, they wanted to take him down. House District 69, 2 years ago. He took down Adam Koenig. They said, we're going to run this Diane Brown against her. What happened there? Doan destroys her. 76-24. These are not even close races. But now go to Northern Kentucky where he had an establishment incumbent, Kim Mosier. She was being challenged by Karen Campbell. Now remember, in Northern Kentucky, all the conservative incumbents demolished their opponent. How did the establishment incumbent do? Well, the race is so close, it hasn't been called yet, for sure. Right now, all that separates them is less than 90 votes. Less than 90 votes separate Kim Mosier, incumbent, from being beat by Karen Campbell. And that's the message. That's the message. The conservative Liberty Republicans in office win big, and they take down incumbents. Meanwhile, the establishment incumbents either lose or barely hang on. If you're a House rep, how should you be voting? We'll talk more about these elections tomorrow. Running out of time. You've heard the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Join us here tomorrow. Let's continue this conversation. You have a great rest of your day.